The elderly mother, desperate, decided to call her adopted son who lived in another country, because her biological children despised her. When her son answered the call, Deborah had always been a woman of great heart and unshakable strength. From a young age, she learned to face difficulties with courage and resilience. She married George, a hardworking man, but life was never easy. Together, they faced poverty, always putting their children first, ensuring they never lacked anything essential. The years passed, and despite the adversities, Deborah kept her family united. She worked tirelessly, often making personal sacrifices to provide a warm and loving home. The nights were long, spent awake, sewing clothes for neighbors and friends in exchange for small change. But she never complained. Her love for her children was greater than any fatigue or pain. When Charles came into their lives, he wasn't just another mouth to feed, but a new hope. Adopted at a time of great difficulty, he brought with him renewed joy. Deborah welcomed him with the same care and love she dedicated to her biological children. Each day with him reinforced her desire to see everyone thrive, regardless of the blood running through their veins. Deborah's husband, George, always supported her in all decisions. Together, they faced life's storms, further strengthening the bonds that united them. Their relationship was an example of partnership and unconditional love. Even in the darkest moments, they found strength in each other, believing that better days would come. This solid love was the foundation of everything they built. Gradually, financial difficulties began to worsen. Job opportunities were scarce and expenses seemed to increase every day. Deborah and George never gave up, always finding a way to keep the family standing. Many times they made difficult choices, like not eating so the children would have what they needed. Faith and determination were their greatest allies. Over time, George's health began to decline. Deborah took on even more responsibilities, caring for him while continuing to support the family. The burden was heavy, but the love she felt for her husband and children gave her strength. She never thought of giving up. The union and affection they shared were her greatest motivation. As the years went by, the family dynamic began to change. Deborah's biological children, who were once the joy of the house, became distant and uninterested in their mother's daily struggles. As they grew up, they moved away from family responsibilities, each following their own path, forgetting the lessons of love and sacrifice that Deborah tirelessly taught them. Mary, the eldest, always had a rebellious spirit. When she was young, she was full of dreams and promises to help the family. However, after getting a stable job, she began to prioritize her own needs and desires. She moved to the big city, where the busy life and new friendships distanced her even more from her roots. Visits became rare, and phone calls sporadic. Liam, the middle child, followed a similar path. Ambitious and determined, he always sought more than the simple life of the countryside could offer. He graduated from university and got a good job, but with it came arrogance. Liam saw himself as superior, despising his parents' humble efforts. He preferred to spend his time at social events rather than return to the home that welcomed him in difficult times. Anna, the youngest, was Deborah's hope. Sweet and caring, she seemed to be the only one who kept her heart close to her mother. But over time, external influences began to shape her attitudes. Anna found a boyfriend who persuaded her to distance herself from the family, convincing her that she needed to live her own life, away from the shackles of her origin. Deborah, heartbroken, saw her last hope drift away. Every time Deborah tried to get closer to her children, she received cold and impersonal responses. Text messages often went unanswered, and family gatherings were marked by excuses and postponements. The biological children, now adults, saw family obligations as a burden, something to be avoided. The love and gratitude Deborah expected from them seemed to have completely disappeared. George, Deborah's husband, also felt the pain of the emotional distance from the children. His health condition worsened, and he longed for moments of reconciliation and closeness with the family. Unfortunately, these moments were rare and fleeting. George's frustration and sadness only increased, and Deborah found herself increasingly alone in the struggle to keep the family united. The few times the children visited were filled with tension. Mary, Liam, and Anna seemed more interested in discussing inheritance and material possessions than sharing moments of affection and love. Deborah listened in silence, her heart heavy with the ingratitude she witnessed. They discussed the future, ignoring the present, where their support and love were most needed. Memories of happy moments were her consolation. Each old photo, each saved letter, was a reminder of the unconditional love that once was. Deborah reread these memories in search of strength, believing that perhaps one day the children would remember how much they meant to her. She refused to give up, even when everything seemed lost. In the silence of her home, Deborah often wondered where she had gone wrong. She searched for answers in past gestures and words said and unsaid. The ingratitude of her children was a pain she carried with her, but her faith in unconditional love kept her standing. She knew that regardless of their behavior, her love would remain intact like a flame that never goes out. As the years passed, Deborah found herself increasingly overwhelmed by financial difficulties. With George incapacitated by illness, the responsibility of supporting the household fell entirely on her shoulders. Bills piled up, and even working exhaustively, she could barely cover basic expenses. The little she earned seemed to evaporate in the face of growing needs. Deborah sold homemade cakes, mended clothes, and even took care of neighborhood children to try to increase her income. However, nothing seemed enough. The market was tough, and opportunities were scarce. More and more, she found herself having to choose between paying for electricity or buying food. The pressure and stress increased, and hope seemed to fade. Loneliness was a constant weight on Deborah's heart. Her biological children, involved in their own lives, rarely communicated with her. The few calls she received were short and devoid of any genuine interest in her situation. She felt abandoned by those she loved most, a stranger in her own children's lives. Deborah spent sleepless nights, worried about the future. With George's health deteriorating and finances in shambles, she wondered how she would survive. Each dawn, she got up with a heavy heart but never stopped fighting. The hope of better days was her only motivation to continue. The emptiness of the house was a constant reminder of the children's absence. The laughter that once echoed through the halls was replaced by the unsettling sound of silence. Deborah, sitting at the kitchen table, often found herself staring at the empty chairs, remembering the times when the family was complete. The past seemed like a distant, almost unreal dream. Each visit to the market was a battle. Deborah juggled coins, trying to stretch the little money she had. Sometimes, the pitiful looks from neighbors hurt more than any financial difficulty. She felt ashamed, but knew she couldn't afford to be proud. Survival was her priority, and she did what was necessary to maintain dignity. The few times she sought help from charitable institutions were humiliating. The long lines and bureaucratic processes were exhausting. Moreover, the help received was insufficient to cover all needs. Deborah realized how invisible she had become to society, an elderly woman struggling alone amid a sea of difficulties. Despite everything, Deborah never gave up on George. She cared for him with all the love and dedication, even when her own strength was at its limit. She spent hours by his bedside, holding his hand, whispering words of comfort and hope. George, though weak, found courage in Deborah to keep going, even in the worst circumstances. The relationship between Deborah and George was the anchor that kept them steady amid the storm. Their love, forged in years of hardship, was unshakable. In moments of despair, a look, a touch, was enough to rekindle the flame of hope. Together, they faced each day as a new battle, determined not to give in. Days turned into months and months into years. The constant struggle wore Deborah down but also strengthened her. Each small victory was celebrated with gratitude. The faith she cultivated over the years kept her standing. She prayed daily, seeking strength to continue, believing that somehow everything would be okay. Deep down, Deborah knew something had to change. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming, and the loneliness unbearable. She looked at the phone with hope and fear, wishing for a miracle. She knew she couldn't go on like this for much longer. The decision she would soon make could change everything, but she had no idea how fate was about to intervene. On a particularly difficult day, Deborah found herself more desperate than ever. The accumulated bills, George's deteriorating health, and the absence of her biological children were an unbearable weight. Sitting at the kitchen table, silent tears rolled down her face. She looked at the phone, remembering Charles, her adopted son, who lived in another country. The decision to call him became inevitable. With trembling hands, Deborah dialed Charles' number. Each ring of the phone increased her anxiety. Finally, after a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Charles answered. His tone was calm and affectionate, a balm for Deborah's troubled heart. "Mom, is that you?" The simple question brought a wave of emotion she could barely contain. Deborah tried to keep her voice steady, but the pain and despair overflowed in her words. She told Charles about the financial difficulties, George's deteriorating health, and the painful emotional distance of the biological children. Each word was an outpouring of years of silent suffering. Charles listened attentively without interrupting, allowing his mother to release all her accumulated anguish. Charles, always sensitive to Deborah's needs, realized the gravity of the situation. His soft and reassuring voice crossed the line, offering not just words of comfort, but a plan of action. "Mom, I'll help you. Don't worry, we'll solve this together." The firmness in his words gave Deborah a breath of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Deborah felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief for finally finding a shoulder to lean on, and guilt for having to turn to Charles, who already had his own responsibilities. However, Charles did not hesitate to assure her that he was willing to do whatever it took. "You took me in when I needed it most, Mom. Now it's my turn to take care of you." The call marked the beginning of a new phase. Charles began organizing financial and logistical help for his parents. He sent money to cover the most urgent expenses, and started planning a visit to see Deborah and George. The prospect of seeing Charles again brought light to Deborah's eyes, a renewal of strength she hadn't felt in a long time. As the days passed, Deborah noticed small changes around her. Bills were paid, groceries were delivered to the door, and the house began to regain some of its old joy. Charles kept in constant contact, offering emotional and financial support. His presence, even from afar, was a beacon of hope in the stormy sea that was Deborah's life. The decision to call Charles was undoubtedly a turning point. Each conversation with him reaffirmed the special bond they shared. The genuine concern and readiness to help were a stark contrast to the indifference of the biological children. Deborah began to feel that finally she was no longer alone in the fight. George, though weak, also felt the positive impact of the call. Charles' attention and care, even from a distance, had a rejuvenating effect. He smiled more, spoke with more hope, and even his health showed signs of improvement. Deborah and George supported each other, strengthened by the love and dedication of their adopted son. Every phone call from Charles was eagerly awaited with joy. Updates about his life abroad, his achievements and challenges, were shared with enthusiasm. Deborah felt connected again, part of something bigger than her immediate worries. The physical distance was overcome by emotional closeness, creating a new chapter in the family's life. The call that changed everything was not just a cry for help, but a reunion of souls. Deborah realized that even in the darkest moments, there was light at the end of the tunnel. Charles, with his kindness and determination, was that light, guiding her to better days. The future, which once seemed bleak, now shone with the promise of new beginnings. Charles always had a generous spirit and a compassionate heart. From a young age, he showed special affection for Deborah and George, seeing in them the family he needed so much. When he moved abroad in search of better opportunities, he promised never to forget the roots that sustained him. The physical distance never diminished the emotional bond he had with his adoptive parents. Established in a new country, Charles built a solid career and a comfortable life. Even so, he kept in regular contact with Deborah and George, sending letters, messages, and making video calls. He knew the difficulties his parents faced and always offered help, though with the modesty of one who did not want to impose. His success never made him forget the people who supported him from the beginning. Distance was never a barrier for Charles. He found creative ways to support his parents, such as hiring local services to help them with daily tasks and ensuring nothing was missing at home. Each act of kindness was a proof of his unconditional love, a silent repayment for everything he received. Deborah felt supported and less alone thanks to Charles' constant care. In one of the annual visits he managed to make, Charles brought new energy to the house. His smile, his stories, and his simple physical presence were enough to renew the spirits of Deborah and George. The love and joy he spread during these visits were precious memories that sustained Deborah in the most difficult moments. Charles' kindness was also evident in his own family. Married with children, he taught them the importance of respect and gratitude. His children grew up hearing stories about their grandparents in the United States, creating an invisible but strong bond with their roots. Deborah, hearing these stories, felt that the love she cultivated transcended generations. Charles also became emotionally involved in his parents' situation. Each conversation was an opportunity to strengthen bonds, to show that despite the distance, he cared deeply. Deborah felt valued and loved, a stark contrast to the indifference of her biological children. Charles was an emotional anchor, someone she could always rely on. Charles' actions inspired even the local community. Neighbors and friends, seeing his example, often offered to help Deborah and George. The impact of his love and dedication transcended borders, creating a support network he perhaps never imagined. Deborah saw this as a reflection of the strong and loving character she helped shape. Deborah's life seemed to be slowly finding balance, thanks to Charles' constant support. However, fate had a cruel and unexpected blow in store. On a rainy afternoon, a call brought the devastating news: Liam, her middle son, had suffered a fatal car accident. The news struck like lightning, leaving Deborah in a deep state of shock. Liam, who had distanced himself so much, now became an unbearable absence. The phone slipped from her hands and Deborah collapsed in tears. Guilt and pain mingled in a torrent of emotions. Despite the strained relationship, he was her son, and the loss was immeasurable. Morning settled over the house like a dense cloud, hard to dissipate. George, already weakened by illness, seemed to age years in just a few days. The news of Liam's death was a blow that his body and spirit could barely bear. Deborah, amid her own pain, had to find strength to console her husband. The shared grief created a heavy silence between them, a pain that only their looks could express. The tragedy brought to the surface a series of painful reflections. Deborah questioned her choices, wondering if she could have done something to prevent Liam's estrangement. Every memory of his childhood, every laugh and play, now carried a weight of longing and regret. The house, once already silent, became a mausoleum of memories. Charles, upon hearing the news, made immediate plans to fly back to the United States. He knew his presence was more needed than ever. During the long journey, his heart was heavy with the pain of loss and concern for Deborah and George. He knew he would need to be the rock for his family in this moment of deep sadness. Charles' arrival brought a brief moment of relief to Deborah. Embracing him, she felt finally understood in her pain. Charles took on the role of organizer, handling the funeral details and ensuring everything was dealt with dignity. His presence was a comfort, a proof that despite the tragedy, the family still had a firm foundation. Liam's funeral was a painfully symbolic event. Mary and Anna, standing by Deborah, wept the loss of their brother. The tragedy, in a bitter way, forced a reunion of the biological children. Charles' presence beside them was a silent reminder of what true family support meant. The wake was a moment of introspection and shared grief. The days following the funeral were the hardest. The void left by Liam was palpable in every corner of the house. Deborah tried to find solace in routine, but every daily activity seemed meaningless. The pain of loss was deep, but Charles' support and the unexpected presence of Mary and Anna brought some comfort. The union, even in pain, offered a new perspective. Deborah often found herself in front of Liam's room, now a painful reminder. She allowed herself to enter, touch his belongings, feel the scent that still lingered in the air. Each object was a link to the past, a connection to the son who was gone. Charles, respectful and sensitive, left her alone in these moments, understanding the need for space for grief. George, though debilitated, found in the tragedy a new strength to approach Deborah. They spent hours together in silence or talking about Liam. Each shared memory was a way to keep the son's memory alive. The love and companionship they always had were now a source of solace and resilience. Mary and Anna, touched by the tragedy, began to show signs of change. Liam's death had opened wounds, but also brought to light the fragility of life and the importance of family. They started spending more time with Deborah, offering help and trying to rebuild broken bonds. Shared pain began to be a catalyst for healing. The tragedy that devastated the family also planted the seeds of a new union. Charles, always present, continued to be the anchor that kept everyone steady. The pain of loss would never go away, but the strength of mutual love and support began to illuminate the dark days. And so, amid the sadness, a new hope began to sprout. The tragedy that shook Deborah's family brought a deep reflection for Mary and Anna. For the first time in years, they saw beyond their own lives and felt the weight of the decisions they had made. The pain of losing Liam was a catalyst that broke the barriers of pride and emotional distance. The two sisters began to realize the value of family and the importance of being present in the most difficult moments. Mary, always the most independent, was the first to take a step towards reconciliation. She regularly visited Deborah, helping with daily tasks and spending more time with George. Conversations between mother and daughter, once tense and brief, were now filled with honesty and understanding. Mary found solace in being close to her mother, something she had long neglected. Anna, still under the influence of her boyfriend, hesitated at first. However, the pain of losing a brother and seeing the sadness in Deborah's eyes was stronger. She started visiting the house more often, bringing small gifts and keeping company. Gradually, the relationship with Deborah strengthened, and Anna felt increasingly connected to her roots. Shared laughter and memories helped heal old wounds. The process of rapprochement was neither easy nor immediate. There was much resentment and pain accumulated over the years. However, each act of kindness, each word of support, helped rebuild the bridge that had been broken. Mary and Anna began to see Deborah not just as an authority figure, but as a woman who sacrificed everything for them. George, though weakened, felt renewed happiness seeing his daughters reapproach. Family meals, once a rare event, became a regular ritual. Sitting at the table, they shared stories, laughter, and even tears. Each meal was an opportunity to reconnect and plan a future together. Deborah felt grateful to have her daughters back, even though the pain of losing Liam still hung over everyone. Mary and Anna began to involve themselves more in Deborah's life, helping with finances and other responsibilities. Conversations once avoided about the future were now faced with courage and determination. Together, they planned ways to ensure Deborah and George were well taken care of. The sense of family, once lost, re-emerged with strength. Bringing a new purpose to everyone, the rapprochement of Mary and Anna not only healed old wounds but also created new foundations for a more united and hopeful future. The love Deborah always dreamed of seeing flourish among her biological children was finally beginning to take shape. Charles, always the pillar of strength for Deborah and George, intensified his support after the tragedy. Even living far away, he made sure to be present at all crucial moments. Frequently, he made daily calls to his mother, ensuring she and George were okay. His comforting voice was a constant relief, and his words brought hope and security in such uncertain times. Besides the emotional support, Charles also ensured the necessary financial support to alleviate Deborah's worries. He organized the family finances, paid off accumulated debts, and made sure his parents had everything they needed. This support was fundamental for Deborah to focus on her emotional recovery and rebuilding family ties. Charles also involved his own family in supporting Deborah and George. His wife and children sent affectionate messages, letters, and videos, creating a network of love and care that transcended physical distance. These demonstrations of affection were a relief for Deborah, who felt the love and presence of Charles in every detail, strengthening her to face daily challenges. Charles' visits to the United States became more frequent. Whenever possible, he traveled to spend time with his parents, helping with daily tasks and offering company. During one of these visits, Charles decided to renovate Deborah and George's house. He wanted to ensure the environment was more comfortable and safe for them. The result was a renovated house, adapted to their needs, bringing a new sense of hope and well-being. Charles' attitude inspired Mary and Anna to get even more involved in their parents' care. They saw in their brother an example of love and dedication they wanted to follow. The positive impact of Charles on the family dynamic was undeniable, and his influence helped solidify the unity they so sought. He not only offered direct support but was also a catalyst for transforming relationships. Charles also maintained constant dialogue with George's doctors, ensuring his father received the best possible care. He organized appointments, discussed treatments, and was always updated on George's health status. His active presence in George's medical care was crucial for the stability and well-being of his father, relieving part of Deborah's pressure. As the family faced health and mourning challenges, unexpected news brought a new wave of happiness. Anna, who had distanced herself, announced she was pregnant. The news of the baby brought a light of hope, a promise of new beginnings amid the difficulties. Deborah, upon hearing the news, felt a mix of excitement and renewal. A new family member was a blessing in such dark times. Anna's pregnancy became an even stronger point of union for the family. Everyone got involved in the preparations for the baby's arrival, from decorating the room to choosing the name. Mary and Charles contributed with advice and support, while Deborah delighted in the prospect of becoming a grandmother again. The anticipation of the new birth brought a joy they hadn't felt in a long time. As Anna prepared for motherhood, Mary also found new purpose. Inspired by Charles' example and mutual family support, she decided to return to school and pursue a new career. The tragedy that shook the family turned into a catalyst for personal growth and overcoming. Mary felt motivated to build a better future, both for herself and for the new generation to come. The birth of Anna's baby was an exciting event for everyone. Deborah was by her daughter's side during childbirth, offering comfort and encouragement. When the newborn's cry echoed through the delivery room, a wave of joy and relief washed over everyone. The baby, a healthy girl named Luna, brought new light to the family. Deborah, holding her granddaughter in her arms, felt indescribable happiness. Luna's arrival not only brought joy but also solidified family unity. Charles, even from a distance, actively participated, sending gifts and messages of affection. Mary, renewed and inspired, dedicated herself to helping Anna with the baby. George, with improved health, enjoyed moments with the new granddaughter, feeling blessed to have lived to see this day. The family, united by love and overcoming, found strength and joy in every new challenge they faced together. Deborah, after years of struggle and sacrifice, finally began to see the fruits of her resilience and love. The house, now full of life and laughter, was a reflection of the warm and welcoming environment she always wished for her family. Every corner vibrated with the energy of Mary, Anna, Charles, and of course, the little granddaughter, who brought renewed joy. Deborah's victory was not in material possessions, but in the union and happiness of her family. George's health, though still fragile, was much better. He was able to participate more actively in family activities, sharing stories and laughter with everyone. Seeing George smile again was a personal victory for Deborah, who always feared losing her husband before seeing the family reunited. The treatment sessions, closely followed by Charles, showed positive results, and this gave Deborah a sense of security and relief. Deborah also found new passions that filled her days with purpose and satisfaction. The craft classes were not only therapy, but also an extra source of income. She began selling her creations in the local community, gaining recognition and respect. Family ties, now stronger than ever, were Deborah's greatest victory. Shared meals, family outings, and moments of simple togetherness were invaluable treasures. Mary and Anna, once distant, were now constant companions, offering love and support. Charles, despite the distance, remained present, solidifying the network of care and support that enveloped the entire family. The birth of the granddaughter brought a sense of renewal to Deborah. Holding the baby in her arms was like holding the future, full of promises and hopes. Each smile from the little one was a reminder of the continuous cycle of life, of the ability to heal and renew. Deborah felt blessed to have the opportunity to experience these joys, which seemed impossible in the times of greatest suffering. Over time, Deborah began to share her story with others in the community. She participated in support groups telling her experiences of overcoming and resilience. Her story inspired many, showing that even in the worst storms, hope and love could prevail. Deborah became a figure of strength and inspiration, a woman who faced adversity and emerged victorious. Deborah's true victory was the realization of an old dream, seeing her family united and happy. Each smile, each hug, each shared moment was a celebration of everything she had fought to achieve. Life, despite all challenges, was now a rich and vibrant tapestry of love, overcoming, and joy. And so, Deborah continued to live each day with gratitude and serenity, proud of the family she helped build. If you enjoyed Deborah's incredible story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any upcoming videos. If you love emotional chronicles and want to support our channel to continue bringing more quality content, consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Your help is essential for us to continue improving. Thank you for your support. See you in the next exciting chronicle.